This is Captain John Marshall from the space cruiser Exchequer, calling the Deep Explorer. This is the Exchequer calling the slick podcast Deep Explorer. Are you receiving? Over.
This is the Deep Explorer, receiving you loud and clear, Exchequer. Status update if you please, Captain Marshall. Please tell me you've trashed that space junk.
Affirmative, Slick Control. We have cleared a path through the other satellites and are continuing to destroy them as they're being replaced. I am happy to report that the acquisition, the Black Knight satellite, is now in position and ready for uplink.
Good work, Exchequer, and my compliments to your crew. Jared and his team are on the way down here as we speak. Once this ancient shiny thing is opened and secure, we can begin. Please remain on station. Deep Explorer, out.
Yes, sir. Understood. Standing by. Exchequer out.
You have tuned in for a Slick podcast. I'm here to seek the truth. Live from Scotland around the UK. The one and only Slick podcast. Enjoy the show. Can I ask important questions? No matter how bizarre the truth might be. Tune in for Slick Podcast, keeping it real, keeping it groovy.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or a very good day to you when and wherever you're listening from, and a very warm welcome to the show. I'm your host, Simon Laurie King. Coming up on today's show, my guest Bridget Jackson talks about her personal experience with domestic violence and physical as well as the mental abuse that she suffered. This is a subject that is important for us as a society to also talk about, recognise and help stop whenever it becomes apparent. Bridget knows firsthand the pain and suffering that is involved in surviving a narcissistic abusive relationship. She survived a 24-year abusive marriage and currently is writing a book about what she endured and the path to becoming a survivor. She has a passion for helping others see the red flags and bring to light what actions we can take and even become a warrior for those currently suffering through the same fate. She is most active on TikTok at Brave and Courageous, and you can also find her on her podcast, How I Survived Domestic Violence, which can be found on most podcast platforms. So without further delay, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Bridget to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure.
You're very welcome. Let's get the ball rolling on this one. Could you start off by telling my listeners a little bit about yourself and the podcast you produce?
Yes. Well, first of all, I am a mother, a grandmother who found my voice through the projection of my son on one of my memories when I was being verbally abused in front of him. He stood up for me when I needed him the most, which woke me up to the fact that I no longer could or needed to live this way. And since then, I've divorced. I moved out of the state that I was originally living in. I produce a podcast that talks about abuse and narcissism and all the red flags, gaslighting, pretty much anything that comes up, whether it is from healing itself, from a relationship with such as this one, or just simply information for warriors that are out there to help people who are in that type of situation.
Bridget, please outline your personal experience with domestic abuse. You don't have to go too deep, what you just feel comfortable with. When it started and the point you realised that there was a problem.
I saw some real troubling behavior very early on, like within probably weeks of me even getting to know the person. And unfortunately, people around me had also been, kind of forgiving of this person of their bad behavior. So there was always ready-made excuses like, oh, he's just an ex-football player. He's just extra aggressive. And it's not to say that all football players are this way, just he was. Okay. And there was just a lot of very much aggressive, controlling, manipulative type of behavior. And one time we actually got into a physical tussle because I came to an aid of another friend of mine, that he was involved with. And, at the time, his wife, his ex-wife had, come to my aid, thinking it was my aid, because I was very distraught by the situation. I'd never been in a physical tussle with pretty much of anybody, and especially not somebody of the opposite sex. And he was much larger than I, and it was just very scary. I found myself in just full on anxiety, panic mode. And his ex-wife came in and she like consoled me, and she just sort of like turned it to be, well, you can't do what you did. You can't intercede with what he's doing. And it was just kind of like laid out like as if this is just the way he is. So I forgave that. I never mentioned it. I never even looked at it as being abusive. So that was what actually opened the door to me forgiving such behavior, and it just, for me personally, it progressively got worse through the years, but that was the first initial one. And that was before we even officially called ourselves together, like at all. Like I said, I was getting to know him, but that was about it.
Would it be fair to say that it was maybe not denial, but you were in shock and you couldn't really deal with the situation and what had happened, so you really just didn't want to, if you were talking to your future self, maybe you'd say that you're just in shock, you haven't thought this out?
Oh, completely. Yeah, I had shakes. I was rocking. I was in full on shock at that point. And if his wife wouldn't have come in, or ex-wife at that time, I think eventually I would have left this situation, because I had all kinds of triggers going off. But it definitely was shock. That's for sure.
You talk about narcissism, and I've looked up its definition, and they are many. Surprisingly, it's healthy and natural. That's according to the definition, to have a sense of it. But also there is a very dark and destructive side to it also. Could you describe your definition when applied to an abusive relationship?
Yes, it's to me, everybody has a little piece of narcissism within ourselves. It's that thing that kind of, hey, you're a bad yamma, you got this, whatever. You look at yourself in the mirror, you go, you know what, you are looking good. Okay, that is healthy. The thing that when I speak of narcissism, it is a grandiose sense of self-importance, preoccupation with fantasies of an unlimited success, like they're superpower, they're super brilliant, their beauty is just forever, The thing is, all of the behaviors are all very egocentric. So everything that they do, everything they say, everything they feel is all about self and how does it affect themselves. They have no empathy unless it comes to themselves. They have like an extremely explosive behavior. Oh goodness. There's just an overwhelming sense of entitlement to no matter what's going on. And no matter what you're going through, you could be in the hospital. And if their needs aren't being met, they're going to come down to the hospital and they're going to chew you out over it. It's just a very, very arrogant, ego-driven type of behavior. And it can even be on the lines of a psychopathic type of behavior. There's a very thin line even when it comes to extreme narcissism and psychopathic behavior.
Would it be too painful for you to give us an example, maybe? I know on your podcast, you've talked about being just woken up and talked to or confronted, straight out of sleep. It's like, what's going on? But is that the sort of thing?
Oh yeah.
Give us an example of that, Bridget.
Yeah, luckily I've been able to process through a lot, so the pain isn't as connected to it as much. But I would have to say one of the things is, for example, one night we were really getting into it, like back and forth all day long. I hadn't slept for a few days. He gave me a sleeping pill. I knew I took it. Okay. But after him giving me a sleeping pill, he still kept me up for another 3 days. Didn't allow me to go to the bathroom. Didn't allow me to leave the room. No drinking, no food. I was his prisoner to do what his will was based on what he felt. And like during that particular moment, he actually wound up sexually assaulting me multiple times because he just felt like it and I had to do it. I was told I do not have a say-so because you knew this is who I was when I met you. That was always his given right there. And it was like, it was my fault for accepting to being involved with this guy, even though this isn't the behavior I saw in the beginning. Because in the very beginning, you get love bombed and it's charismatic and he's just full of charm and everything is like the perfect person is you found them, and then they turn into a monster that will assault you and berate you. They will tear you down from any piece of self-esteem you might have. By the time you get out, you have none or next to none.
I have to say that I can't really put it any other way, Bridget, but when you were going through this 3 days of torture, were you listening to it being blamed, or were you accepting the blame? It's probably a really dumb and stupid question, or flip it on its head. If a victim, which is having similar, because I know you help a lot of people that probably have very similar stories. Is there any sort of doubt in that victim's mind or your mind that or maybe it was my fault? And that is playing devil's advocate. I in no way excuse that behavior whatsoever. But did you even for a moment think, well, maybe this was my fault?
Yeah, that was the codicil for allowing any and all abuse to go on, was because from the very beginning, way early on, things would go wrong, and he would flat out tell me, it's your fault. You did this in some way. And it could be simply he lost a job off of his bad behavior, but it was my fault in the end because, he was so preoccupied with something that pissed him off that I did or something. But the whole thing, even during, like you said, that's a very correct term to use this, was a 3-day period of torture that is truly, if you want to look at this and be able to heal from it, you have to look at the reality of what you're going through or what you've gone through. And in order for that type of level of torture to go on, I was full on committed to everything being my fault, my problem. I was wrong. He did a wonderful job doing that.
Being a mother also, how did that affect the children? I mean, you're keeping house. I don't know if you're working. I mean, that's a job in itself, keeping house. But being a mother also, that must have been terrifying maybe for your children. Or your child, did your children or child, did they witness this?
They, unfortunately, he probably wound up hearing every argument because most of the time we lived in apartments, and with that you have thin walls, especially within your own apartment. There were periods where we lived in houses, but he has had to hear just about every argument that we have ever had. I can honestly say, naively, I actually believed that he would never harm my child. because he was our child, because he was the father. So I always just thought that he did this because of me being a bad person. Like, that was legitimately what I believed for many years. If I was only a better person, if I was a better wife, if I was a better mother, if I was whatever, it would make him be better. But I always was thoroughly convinced he would never do anything to my son. And right before I left, I found out from my son, I was very wrong. He had been abusing him for years, and I didn't know it. And that in itself as a mother has rocked my world completely, because my whole sense of mothering has always been to try to protect my child at all costs. And come to find out, I couldn't do that, especially when it came to this, because he would wait till I was at work, and I would work like 13-hour days.
I'm sure you know this, Bridget, but from having the honour of listening to your podcast and having you on my show now,
yes,
that's really kind of knocked me sideways. Bridget, what would you say to your younger self, leaving the abuse of your son aside? What would you have said to your younger self? And would your younger self have listened to anybody?
Honestly, they would have had to catch me before I fell in love with him. Because once I fell in love, I was bought hook, line, and sinker, everything all in. And I'm the type that I am a long-term relationship type individual, and I am a very dedicated type of person where, I don't mess around. I don't do side stuff, and if I would have caught myself prior to me really admitting even to my own self that I fell in love with him, then I would say, yeah, I would probably have listened. After that, you would have had to been hammering at my door an awful lot and showing me and proving to me, hey, see, because throughout my life, even while I was being abused, I had women coming to me asking me for abuse help. And here I was helping other women and telling them, you shouldn't be putting up with this. You're worth a lot more than that. And I'm pointing out all their good features and how great of a woman they are and just simply a great person, and I'm helping them try to figure out how they can come up with the money to leave or what plan to take. And little did I know, if I would have just turned the mirror for a minute, I would have realized I was helping somebody just like myself. But I hadn't even realized what I was living through was even abuse in itself.
Could have
so
been.
It's kind of a mixed answer, but,
Do you think, before we move on, do you think that could have also been a huge measure of self-talk, but you just didn't realize it back then?
Oh, completely. Because my self-talk was him, like flat out. Because I was 19 when we got together. I was very, very naive. I really thought narcissism, and I hadn't even heard the term. All I heard was, oh, you just love yourself too much. Okay. I had a sister who would kiss herself in the mirror, and that's what I thought what that was. I didn't realize what he was doing to me was actually a lot more sadistic than what the term that I had, understand what that had meant initially. So there was definitely, it was just, like I said, you have that self-talk of their voice in your head, and it is not positive at all, like, period. There's always a flaw that seemed to be pointed out, even in the most love bombing of moments. There was always something that was being pointed out, like, what's that crease on your knee for? And it makes you self-conscious and it's very weird, because when I speak of it, it sounds okay, well, it's a crease on a knee, what's the big deal? But when you're getting things pointed out to you like that all the time, or, how come you have this role on this side but not on this side, or, it could be anything, not just physical. It could be just simply they will point out the fact that they truly believe they are much smarter than you, and you can't outsmart them. You can't out anything of them, and they let you know that. And those are the words that trigger in your head when you are by yourself and you're away from them, and you feel like, because their energy is so gross and heavy, when you do get away from them, say you're at work or something, those same thoughts are still ruminating, going over and over and over in your head. So you really don't get an escape from it.
So it reminds you of the control, the mind programming. It's like a top up, mentioning the creases in your trousers or something quite not being right, as you would put it, in between. In between the love bombing, there's a subliminal, but just remember who's in charge here. Is that right? Or am I, I'm not trying to play for the crowd and, give the thumbs down, but is that where you're coming from here?
Oh, no, you are, yeah. Yes, very much so. Like I said, there's a lot of techniques to this. And a lot of them are, in my case, it was a man. So that's why I use the terminology that I use. But, in my case, and in many cases, especially with narcissism, they are womanizers. They flat out. And so they have a history of how to manipulate and how to get what they want from the opposite sex. And sometimes you won't know it until it's too late. Especially like in my case, I didn't realize I was being manipulated, or that I was being, in a sense, brainwashed. And the more naive you are when they get with you, the hungrier they are to get to your brain, if you will, because they're it's kind of like the Pinocchio thing. They want to be the one that's controlling the strings. And the more naive that you are, the easier of a platform it is for them to get to you. And like in my case, I was 19 years younger than he was. So there was a definite disadvantage even on that. I had never been in a relationship where there was that much of a difference. And it was a definite, I am in control. You will do what I want, and you will do it because I say so. I even had a situation where I was telling him, because he was getting older in age, he was in his 60s, and this is prior to me leaving, I had told him, if you keep behaving this way, you realize I'm the one that's left here to hold your hand when you are old and you can't walk and you can't change your own underwear or anything else. And he goes, I know, but you have to, because you're my wife, and I say you do it, so you're going to. He literally thought I would. And that was one of the comments that got me to start realizing, who the hell did he think he was? And so, like I said, there's a definite control is a main factor to what they do.
Listening to your podcast and listening to you here, it seems to me that on a broad spectrum, we won't just talk about your experience here, but in your experiences helping others, listening to you now, I would say that the abuser, whether they be female or male, because we can have abusers of all genders here, the sustenance isn't just the meat and potatoes you put on the table. It's also the energy and misery of that person. Do you come across it that way, that they actually need that as well as the food they eat?
Yes, it's I have found out one of the best things that anybody can do, and I don't care if you are being abused, think somebody's being abused, you want to help somebody out, you have a family member, whatever it is, or just curious about the subject. Anything that anybody can do, and the best thing, educate yourself. For me, YouTube was my rabbit hole I went down. And I have to give major props to Dr. Ramani on YouTube. She, to this day, is a source that I use. to educate myself, to get myself out of some of these yucky stuff. But she's one that has clearly clarified it for me that these narcissists, like you said, they do come male, female, black, white, it doesn't matter. There is no, narcissism does not discriminate. So it can hit any and all facets of life. It can hit any and all members of society, where you have money, don't have money, you have connections, don't. It doesn't matter. Male, female, person of importance to somebody who, is bagging your groceries at the grocery store. Everybody and anybody can be hit by this. But the bottom line is, this is where it comes from, is these people were injured as children. They had some form of trauma or traumas. And instead of, like a lot of us, we try to move past our trauma and we grow from it. Like for me, when I had trauma as a child, I became very empathetic and very much a people pleaser. Okay. For him, it was turned into, his traumas were more, well, I didn't get the love and the affection I needed, so now I'm going to get it any way I can, however I can, because it's all about me. And it's a very kind of a bitter way, kind of like if somebody harms you and you don't forgive them. To me, I needed to forgive because of my own sense of self and my own, I needed to come to peace within. Okay. Had nothing to do with anybody else. For me, that was a healthy move. For others, it may not be. But the forgiving, like when you forgive as a kid, or you don't, if you don't as a child, you will become bitter. You will become evil-esque, if you will, because all you know is bad. I mean, you couldn't find the light or the silver lining in the bad that happened to you. And for me, that's kind of what this is. This is me finding a path for my silver lining for all the bad that's gone on.
Before I ask you about that defining moment when you'd said enough is enough, before I ask you that, let me ask you, your story is not just of mental abuse, but physical also. You were married for 24 years and suffered greatly. At what point, generally, okay, across the board, not just for yourself, at what point do friends, lovers, turn that relationship so dark and introduce violence or, in your case, mental and physical torture? I mean, is there a particular point, do you think? It's after the honeymoon period's over, or when do you think that is?
Well, that is the tricky part as far as, because it shows up really early, like very early, even during the love bombing stage, when they're mirroring everything that you have told them that you want in a partner. You want somebody who doesn't lie. You want somebody who, is going to be a helping hand, whether, just little different things. Okay. And they kind of try to portray that as close as they possibly can. But within this stage, they're giving you the admiration. They're putting you up on a pedestal and giving you, like for me, I had never been in a relationship that ever did that. So for me, I felt like I was being tossed around like a pancake in a friggin' skillet over and over again. I wasn't able to get my feeding because that was just not something I was used to. And it was never something I even got even from my own father. So I never had that kind of, like, I don't know any other way to put it, but basically putting you up on a pedestal like you're something super special. But in the same time that that's going on, they are still putting you down for things and finding flaws and letting you know that they are in control and they are the smarter one. And they know that, you don't know, that's why I'm here. They kind of try to be that. It's actually a fake hero is what they become. And it just, it plays a role for other members of like the family or friends who know of his behavior and know of his past and know how he's been with others, because he's the same way with everybody. They did not let me know. They didn't tell me. That's the one thing I wish I would have been told from very early on. Instead of don't hurt my brother, could you guys have told me a little warning of don't hurt my brother, because I'll tell you, this is what happened with the last one. Okay. Or, however you want to put it. I feel like the people who knew him for years prior to, and I don't know who all knew and who didn't, but anybody who knew that he was abusive in the past, I personally would have appreciated at least, a heads up. But once I did tell people, I had one of his sisters that basically wanted, to tell me what I had done wrong. And then I had another one of his sisters that I had grown very close with through the years. She was there for me, period. She was telling, be careful, do this. She was very integral in helping me, especially once I left, because that is a whole different being that you've never met. That was the being that was inside every time they hit you or choked you, or like in my case, he would get into a rage and his eyes would become black. It was very scary. But nobody really, I didn't have a lot of people not believe me when I told them, except for a couple. I did have my own dad who questioned it, but come to find out he's a narcissist too. So I think that had played a role in that. But overall, it's just something that happens very subtly throughout even the very beginning. And there are people in the beginning stages that set the tone for what you're going to accept for years down the road.
What was the defining moment that you said, okay, that's enough, time out, I'm out of here? When did that obviously 24 years down the line, but what was it that made you suddenly realise I'm not standing with this anymore? Because you've been abused for 24 years, and I would have thought any fight had been long, forgive the term, since knocked out of you. And again, that's a devil's advocate term there, so don't be offended by it. What was that moment?
Yeah. I would have to say it was that moment when my son stood up for me, period. Normally we didn't get into major fights in front of our son, but the older he got, the more that did occur. And at this time, I think my son was like 18 or 19, something like that at the time. And it was the very first time that my husband at the time, in front of my son, had called me a bitch. Like, that had never, ever happened. And that was the trigger term that my son decided. He got in front of me, in between me and my ex, and he said, you can't talk to her that way. And he said, yes, I can. And my son said, no, that's my mother, and you can't talk to her that way. So my ex says, she's my wife, and I can talk or do whatever the hell I feel because she's my wife. And my son just kind of puffed out his chest and let it physically be known, you're going to have to come through me first, without saying so many words. And my ex just kind of turned and walked away in a big huff. But that was the moment when I said, you know what? If my son was willing to go to bat for me, he was willing to get into a physical fight with this man to protect me, I can't do this anymore, because obviously this isn't just between me and him anymore. And that was a defining moment for me. And that was April 20th of 2019.
So how hard was it for you to to leave? I mean, emotionally, you decided to go, but financially, I mean, a lot of people in a relationship where they cannot continue, they're bound by, they haven't got the money, they haven't got anywhere to stay. Let's talk about somebody else's situation. What would you say to them? You know, should they be thinking, oh, maybe I should stay because I just got nowhere to go and I haven't got the money? I mean, were you in that position or?
Oh, I was very much in that position. I was literally barely able to make our rent every month. So I had no extra funds. And I also was and still am caretaking for my father, who was living with us and still is. And so there was a lot on that I had to consider, because if I leave, it isn't just me. I wanted to make sure, because my son was living in the home at the same time as well. He was looking at moving out, so I had to consider, okay, timing with that, because I wasn't going to leave him behind. That I wasn't going to do. I wasn't going to leave my dad behind. He was almost fully immobile at that moment, you know. So it just, there was a lot of family members within the home that I had to really consider. I had considered at one point in time, I will wait till my dad passes. But I quickly realized I can't do that. I mentally, physically, I looked myself in the mirror and I looked like death was at my door. And the more I was trying to convince myself, you've stayed this long, what's a few more years? It was making me more ill than I already was. And for me, I was sort of lucky because I was going to school for my master's and I was getting financial aid, which meant I was getting kind of a stipend, if you will, of whatever monies were left over from particular periods of the grade cycle. Then I would get an influx of money, and that helped. But I literally, he would take the money, and there was one that I was able to say, I did not get this last disbursement because I kind of laid the groundwork earlier that I wasn't sure if I was even going to get that last one or not. So thank goodness I did. So I had an influx of $3,000. And that is what provided me to get my family out of one state and into another, into an apartment. Granted, I had the tiniest trailer that they had, but I took whatever it was that I could. He was left with a fully furnished, food-wise, refrigerator, everything apartment. And all I can say is look for the resources that you don't think you have, you might actually have. Ask people, hey, can I get on your couch? You know, sometimes it's a matter of living in your car for a while. If I didn't have my dad, that's probably what I would have done. I would have lived out of my vehicle. I had a van. It was comfy, you know. I literally, to me, as victims of this type of abuse, if you don't find a way to get out, you're going to die. And if it's not from the stress and the strain that the body, mind, and spirit go through during something like this, it will wind up being you are going to die at the hands of your abuser. Because I have a very vivid day, and I'm sure everybody remembers, at least here in the United States, George Floyd was killed by officers who were choking him, who put their weight on his neck. I had the same exact thing happen, and I said the same exact thing. I can't breathe because my abuser was sitting on my throat, not allowing me to move, and my face was into a pillow. And my father was in the living room. This is definitely one of those moments that I knew I needed to find a way to get out. And it was just, these are things like him choking me and putting his weight on me like he did. He weighed over 300 pounds. I had a pillow that was pressed up against my face, my mouth, and my nose, so there was no escape for me to breathe. And that was the scariest, closest moment that I felt I was literally going to pass out. And after that is when I was like, if I stay, I'm going to die from his hands. Like, that was the first time I literally thought he could kill me. And to me, we have to find a way to get out some way, somehow. And I don't care if you go to your religious community, you go to your neighbors, you go to your family, you go to your friends, somebody somewhere, someone is bound to at least have a couch for a few days. And you just work it from there. You know, I know it's a lot harder when we got kids, but literally you've got to exhaust all of your energies trying to find that answer. And I literally started with, okay, if I was to leave, what do I need first? I said, first and foremost, you need a place to live. And, you know, that's what I started doing before I even knew how much money I would have. I wanted to make sure I had an apartment that was, okay, this is yours. Okay, fine, great. When I get there, we'll be able to do the money exchange and whatever. But it's definitely, you have to look at the basics. What do I need? What would I need if I'm not living here? Because to me, I wouldn't want to stay in the same location that I was in. You know, I was luckily, it was an apartment. We were month to month. So for me, it was simple. It could have been a lot more extensive than that, you know, but really you got to look at what you need. What does your family need? Is it just you? Is it, you know, kids? How old are they? You know, would it be better if they stay at, you know, an auntie or grandma and grandpa's house for a few days while you get to stay? You know, like I said, you really got to look at all the different aspects of it. You know, is your job able to move? You know, can you go from one location to another? For me, I did not. I wound up becoming a teacher online, which saved my rear on that too, because I didn't have a physical location. I had to worry about him stalking me, because they will stalk you. That's almost a guarantee, because you are what they had control of, and that's what they want back. So, like I said, it's you just got to muster up all your mama bear, your mama bear, papa bear type stuff when you, especially dealing with the kiddos, being involved with this. So, but the best thing, you just got to find, there are resources. If you have kids, there's a lot more resources. I didn't get any resources from communities because I didn't have any minor age children. If my dad would have been under the age of 18, I would have had possibility of having an apartment set up for me. I would have had, I think they said I could have gotten $1,500 for arriving in the new state. I mean, there are resources that are there. You just got to go to, like, the a lot of them are like, I always call it county assistance. But it's basically, it's state assistance. You just got to go to your local offices and they will help you. They have help. They know of places. Even though they couldn't financially or physically really help me with anything, they sent me to a place that helps with counseling and things like that. So I was able to get some of those other type of help once I did get to town. So, you know, like I said, it's just imperative to go to your county offices and find out what resources you even have available, because they do change from county to county and state to state.
So what help did you receive from friends or family around you? Now, was the abuse, it sounds maybe for 24 years, was the abuse hidden well, if you can hide abuse well? Was it known in the family as like the dirty washing that nobody talks about, or was the family well aware of it, and did they try and help you?
I do not believe the family was, if nothing else, fully aware. There were certain things that he would point out flaws sometimes, or say something I did or said something wrong, or that I was stupid or something like that in front of family. And later I found out that they had kind of their own conversations of, oh my gosh, did you just see that? But it was never, he was very good about making sure that he didn't leave bruises. And when he did, they would be in areas that would be covered by clothing. He, a lot of times, most of his abuse, especially the physical abuse, was typically behind closed doors. At one point, like I said, he didn't argue and fight with me in front of my son. But the older he got, the more he felt freer to do so. And part of that was the mask that he was wearing as being, I'm a good father. I won't do such things in front of my kid. But it's not something he was in the habit of flaunting out for everybody. And I would even get punished later, and I do not use punish loosely. It is a very vivid term on it. Because at one point in time, I was in such a mental state that I started punching my own self. And then I was threatened for further abuse if I continued it, which got me to stop. Okay. But one of the times that I hit myself, I got myself in the face. And he felt like he was being looked at by everybody, like at the grocery store or whatever, like he hit me. And he hated that. I'm not an abuser. He said that to one of the last days that I saw him before I officially left. And that was like, he did not want to be labeled as an abuser, but this is what he was doing, and I literally got physically punished when I got home because people were looking at him like he abused me. So since that's how they were looking at me, that's why I got what I got.
After the
Again,
fact,
my fault for, and it was literally, yes, after the fact.
so once the terrible realization that your son, and we don't need to go on about this or into it anymore. This will be the last question in reference to your son. After that had come to light and the family around you had learned that, did anybody say to you, we should have done more, or we didn't realize, or we didn't know? How could we have not seen this? Not just about your son, but everything. I mean, you're living hell, which I can't really describe it any other way.
Yes, it was living hell. There were a few people that they kind of, like I said, the thing of the ridicule in front of them, that's how that got brought up was, we saw this and we thought it was off, but we didn't know how serious it was. We wish we would have known. But in that situation, you are programmed not to talk about this. I mean, my son even was told, and this even came from me, from even my own family. And yes, my dad's a narcissist, so that's probably how that all got started. But I've even heard of, AKA normal families who say what happens in the house, it's family business. We don't talk about our business outside on the street. And that kind of stuff is kind of what starts the foundation of not opening up to people about the bad, because you're going to a family function to have fun for, your niece's birthday. Who wants to be the downer that just told everybody that uncle has been beating up auntie for the last 15 years? And you have to come to realization on many very kind of minute, tiny steps to get to the point of even speaking your truth. And for me, I had examples to help me, to kind of say, hey, let's lead the path here to open up, because I had a group of 5 ladies that I was very close with, but none of them knew that I was being abused until until one day we were having a birthday celebration for my birthday, and it was the day after my birthday. And it was literally because I had been watching, I don't know if you remember them or not, but we had a Supreme Court judge who was trying to be going in, and he had a victim of sexual assault that he had, Dr. Christine Baisley Ford. She had her testimony, and it hit such a chord that night after me watching her testimony, I went straight to my girlfriend's house. We were having to get together for my birthday. Before everybody showed up, I told the host of the party, and it turned into a night of, oh my gosh, we did not know. How come you didn't tell us? And so I opened up and told them. And then I found out that night I had another friend of mine who was being abused, and he was using guns. So in front of the children, so it really, the examples that I had of breaking my silence is what helped me break my silence. And once I did, I feel I had a luckier road because a lot of people believed me. I didn't have a lot of the doubters. Like I said, my dad, he's in a whole other ball of himself. But all my siblings, any friends that I've told, literally anybody I've told, I really have a very few who didn't believe me. And if they were part of the group that didn't believe me and they questioned it, a lot of times it was questioning because they had similar behavior. So, but generally the help that I got was pretty much support, because financially I didn't run with people that had extra cash or an extra house, their summer house or something. I didn't run in those circles. I ran in the circles of, at one point I was a full-time daycare teacher, and that's where I met the group of women that I became very close with. We were all daycare teachers at one point at the same location. So, but generally it was just, hey, we are here. You haven't lost friends. There's just more distance between us now, kind of thing. So, but, to me, that I would say probably meant more to me than if somebody would have given me a few $100s, to be honest.
Because your internet presence is growing, you're on TikTok, and obviously you have a podcast, and you're writing a book, and I'm looking forward to reading that book. Do you have guys approaching you, not as abusers, but being abused themselves?
I have in my circle of what you call, I guess, a TikTok family, if you will. There's a couple of them that are on there that I do talk to, but they're in the same situation that I'm in, where they've left and now they're educating. But I really have not had any males reach out to me. I've only had females reaching out to me, and about females. It's not, but I do know that the opposite happens. I've seen it myself. So, I think it's just a lot harder. I think because of the social stigmas as a whole with abuse is very difficult. But as a man, I'm not a man myself, but from everything that I have been explained of what core maleness comes from, a lot of times it's literally just the society and the way that, you're a man. What do you mean a woman beat you up? And it's like, well, because I was taught not to hit her, or, I mean, there's this other behavior, this other side that it's hard enough as a victim to come to the realization and then speak your truth. But you add on the extra special sauce of being a man in today's society, it's extra hard for men to come forward. And good luck if you tell a police officer that you're being abused by a woman. Because I have literally seen where I know the man was just beat up by this woman, and he did everything he could not to hit her because he was taught you don't hit women. You got the lesson, But unfortunately, she got a twisted version of that lesson, And so he wound up going to jail, and they let her stay there because she claimed that he hit her. But yet there were like 10 other people around that saw that he was being hit, and they were just like, no, you guys saw it wrong. I'm like, what? So it is an uphill battle no matter what kind of victim. But if you are a male victim, I do believe that hill is a lot harder to climb. Just, the societal structures in it of itself. And the people that work within those communities, like police officers and stuff, that if you don't believe me and you're my contact to help protect me from this person who's acting crazy, where do I go? And that will quickly shut down what voice you did have or were going to have, because you automatically weren't believed. And if you are not believed as a victim, that first coming out of what's going on, you will all of a sudden you'll just go right back down into your shell again. And like I said, I know it is very difficult for men to go through something like this.
But you would help someone if somebody contacted you through your podcast or reached out on TikTok.
I've only had females reach out, but yes, it is something I do help out with in any way that I can.
Okay, then, your experience has made you stronger, certainly. But has it prevented you from forming another long-term relationship, or is that trauma preventing your trust from being given?
Well, I would have to say I'm working through a lot of my trauma at this point. And even though I have worked through a lot of things within the abuse of this relationship, it opens up a lot of doors and windows to other traumas that led to me being vulnerable or not understanding of this kind of monster, that got me in this situation in the first place. But for me, again, I am a long-term relationship kind of person. I am a one person dedicated to you kind of thing. But I want it to be at a point when I can freely love and trust. And as long as I haven't worked through some of these traumas, to me, I don't want to be the cause of somebody else's trauma. I want to be a solution. I want to be an example of this is what love is like. This is what trust is like. This is, that kind of thing. Yes. And I want them to be the same for me because I've never had that either. And to me, it is out there. It's just, it would be very irresponsible of me for me to say, jump into a relationship now, knowing that I can still heavily get triggered by my dad, who's a narcissist, and he has some of the same very like behaviors. I am literally in a situation, in essence, I'm stuck. I have to help my dad, all of my other siblings will not, because they helped him and he became too much for them. And he's at the point in his life where he's at the end tail of it, but he's still very much mean and aggressive with me. And there are times I've had to talk to my dad in a way that I've never spoken to any parent, let alone my own, But to me, he is one of those codicils that there's a lot I know I have to work through. And there's even some of it I can't work through until I no longer am caretaking for him. So like I said, I'm very open to it. It's just right now, I don't think it would be a good idea, So
So where can people find help? We're talking about the US now. My listeners around Europe and the rest of the world, I'm sure by what you're going to tell us, it'll be pretty much similar. But where can people, if they're listening to this podcast or your excellent podcast, or read your book when it comes out, and they think, okay, enough is enough, where can they go? What can they do? What should be the first phone call?
I would actually call the domestic violence hotline. You literally can just type in domestic violence on, like when you get into Google or whatever, and you will see all kinds of stuff. Your local area will automatically come up. And if you just simply make contact with them, they will be there to listen. They will be there to lead you to where, hey, you want to go to a meeting, you need to talk to somebody more one-on-one. You want to find more about the resources kind of thing. They can lead you in wherever they need. And their overall thing is your safety. And they can help you even with getting a safety exit plan put together. Which basically, like having a go bag. Make sure you've got clothes packed up. Make sure you have an extra spare keys, an extra ID, things of this sort. Money, cash, whatever. Card if you can, but typically try to keep with cash because a card can be followed. Like I said, once you leave, they will try to track you down any and every way they can. They're going to try and stalk you. You have to be prepared that this might happen. And one of the best moves you can do, the moment you leave, file for a restraining order. Because all that stuff, the amount of time that has gone by from the time that the last time they hit you to now is all going to be against you if it's more than 6 months ago. Period. And these people are pretty smart about it. Like I said, they'll wait. And if they know the law, like mine, he really knew the law. So he made sure that the physical stuff was enough further away from when I was really getting to a point of knowing what I was going to be doing. And I think he sensed it, because you're going to act different. You're going to act more gray rock, One of the other things you can do is not only look up your domestic violence resources just literally online. You can go on YouTube. You can look up domestic violence there, what it is, what are the red flags, what are, and that's how I initially started, was thinking this was just domestic violence, and come to find out he was a narcissist. And that I found out through educating myself. And then I realized he wasn't just a narcissist, but he is a borderline psychopathic narcissist. So there's like extra sauce on all of that, and there's different ways you got to manage that, because I did one of the biggest mistakes you can ever do. Do not ever tell an abuser, they're abusers. That is the worst thing. And if it's a narcissist or some other type of, I don't quite know what to label that as, but some kind of just change. And to me, that's a mental disparity there, because there is no empathy. There is no, they just think of self and any and all facets, and they will do any and all things to ruin you. And sometimes while you're still in the relationship, just do not tell them that is what they are, because all that's going to do is amp up their game. And that's what happened to me. He amped up his game because I thought I was doing something positive by, hey, look, I figured out what the issue is, like, to me, what a loving wife would do if her husband is going through changes. You want to find the answer. You want to find a way that's going to make it better, and I did that. And later I got the education. Don't say this to anybody, or don't say this to him or her, whoever it is that's victimizing you. Say it to other people. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. That's part of you breaking your silence. But when you go to them and bring it to them, like, hey, I found this golden egg, to them, it's not. They're going to turn it into a weapon, flat out very quickly. But that's one of your best things. Like I said, go to your county offices and look up domestic violence resources on any computer. It could be a library computer if you don't feel comfortable using your one at home. Just be very careful of even stuff like that, looking up information like that. If it's not in, I don't remember what mode they call it, but basically when it's not in that hidden mode or on somebody else's computer, they can easily look up your history and they'll see you were looking up these things. So like I said, you have to become very sneaky in a way, because you have to hide things you never hid before. Like for me, I was always a very open book with him. And towards the end, he didn't know I got that last deposit. He didn't know I was in contact with people trying to find an apartment. He didn't know I'd applied for apartments or applied for jobs in this particular state, or, so you really you have to be careful with what you do. Just, think of it like as if you have somebody stalking you now. So that way, some of those type of mistakes, like just freely looking for something on your computer, you don't do while you're still with that person, because they're going to see that and know, and that's going to be a whole other thing you really don't want to deal with,
How about from an outsider? If somebody thinks that, or somebody knows that a person's being abused, maybe a father or a mother knows their son or daughter in a marriage or a relationship maybe, or a friend or a cousin, fill in the blank, is being abused. Is there anything they can do? And because I think probably the person would think, oh, I don't want to get involved. I don't want to suddenly throw trouble into their relationship and it'll be my fault. But for myself, I would have to say something. I would like to think I would say something. What would your advice be there? Because it's very awkward and delicate. And maybe some of your friends, maybe after the fact, said that to you. We didn't want to say anything. We didn't really want to. Yeah.
I had many situations like that. I had, like, my oldest sister. She, this was fairly early. It was on the earlier section of the relationship, but after I had still had my son. But she had asked me one day, it was just over the phone, and we were going through all kinds of issues, and she had just said, can I talk to you in private? And I go, okay. So I took the phone in another room, and she had asked me, do we need to worry about what he's doing to you guys? And I go, what do you mean? Because I played stupid, and I was at first offended. I will be honest. Because I hadn't told anybody. I hadn't even come to realization to even label it as abuse by then. At that point, I really just thought he was a difficult person to deal with. Okay. But I can honestly say the more things that I came across that gave the answer that I needed to leave I was riddled. When I look back, there were all kinds of things and people and stuff that presented itself to me without me realizing it. But to me, the best thing you can do is go to that victim and just tell them, hey, I understand you may not want to talk about it now. Just know I got your back. I don't care what's going on. Any time of day, my number, don't lose it. You got it, and just remind them of that, Because my sister, she did a wonderful job on planting that seed. Because it was after that, other people would come to me, and I wasn't offended anymore though. And it was her call that got me through the offense part of it first. And for whatever reason, that was my reaction, and I think it's just part of it was because I hadn't realized it myself. And it just, to me, hey, I heard some stuff knocking. I heard you guys arguing the other day. Just know I got your back. You need a place to stay. Need a couple hours just to cool off, whatever. Whatever it is that you can provide. To me, that is, it's literally a godsend for any victim to literally know somebody can be there. Don't worry. Whatever you say is between us, because that's why I'm talking to you now. Because you are not the problem, and this is not your fault, And the more we tell victims that it's not their fault, the more that they're probably going to wind up coming around and breaking that silence, which is what gives them the power to leave. Because if I would have never broken my silence, I know I would never have left. Period.
That's us at the top of the hour, Bridget. And I really appreciate the time you have given us today. And I'd ask that you consider coming back sometime when your book comes out. You really are an inspiration to us all and what it means to survive. Before we wrap up, please tell my listeners where they can find you on social media and when we can expect your book.
My book should be out sometime within the next year. Like I said, I'm currently writing it, so I'm trying to get that out as soon as I can. And as far as social media goes, I can be found on TikTok at Brave and Courageous. And that is where I have my most activity from. I'm really more active on there probably than anything else. And I can also be found on Facebook at Love Isn't Hurt. That one I'm not as active, but again, I put up good information every once in a while over on there. I'm trying to kind of intermingle the TikTok and Facebook together with it, so I kind of give a little bit more information that I've been providing on TikTok to add to my Facebook. So, but I make videos. I've been trying to make videos at least like once or twice a week lately. Sometimes I make it, sometimes I don't, but but that's basically the two places. And like I said, within the year, I should be having my book out. I'm hoping come Christmas, but if not, then it will be no matter what come April of next year.
And your podcast also?
Yes, that one is, hold on, let me get the right word on it. It's Domestic Violence and How I Survived.
Bridget Jackson, thank you.
Thank you. This was really nice.
And that was the Bridget Jackson interview. My apologies for the sound quality my end, as yet again the very poor internet connection, unlike my bill paying for the above, was quite sporadic. Originally I was trying to get someone on the show from a victim support group to talk about domestic violence, but the universe seemed fit to bring Bridget and her mission to my show, and for that I am truly grateful. The discussion we had was in places upsetting, I grant you, but these things must be talked about and shown for what they are, and that is unacceptable behaviour. No one has the right to abuse another. No one has the right to lay hands on another in anger because of their own inadequacies or lacking morality. There are plenty of excuses, but no valid justification for such wicked behaviour. In my opinion, we are born of this world and at some point through this life grasp the reasons for living, and that is joy and love. Admittedly, it could be when we are decades into this life or at the moment of our passing, but the fact remains, in my book, that living is for joy and not for anyone else's oppression to be visited upon another, be they woman, child, man or animal. If you or maybe someone you know is being abused mentally or physically, If you take anything away from this interview, then as Bridget stated, you don't have to live like that. And if it's someone else, then be there for them. They might not appreciate your offer of help initially, but they will know someone has seen through that public facade and will be there to help when needed. Lastly, if you are the victim of abuse, remember that the law of the land, wherever you're listening from, is on your side, and there is definitely help waiting. My thanks to Bridget for the time she gave us today, and my thanks to you, my dear listeners, for attending this cast, as it's always a pleasure to have you stop by. If you enjoyed the show, please give it a like or subscribe also, if you'd be so kind. Leave a comment below or send the show an email, theslkpodcast@gmail.com. But either way, please, keep them kind. You can find the show on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and all the usual podcast platforms. As I mentioned last week, the Slick Podcast is having a website built, and hopefully that will be up and running soon. You'll be able to check out all the novelty show beginnings and mid-show ads. I didn't put one on this episode as I thought it inappropriate and wanted no interruption to Bridget's story. And so, my friends, it's time for me to go. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and certainly not afraid. Bye.
Slick Podcast. Keeping it real and always keeping it groovy.